Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar from BizLaunch called Pivot, Adjusting to Uncertainty. My name is Alex Held. I'm the Small Business Manager here at Arlington Economic Development. And I am pleased to introduce our speaker today, Alan Zucker, from Project Management Essentials. His 25 years of experience in working with and leading Fortune 100 companies. In 2016, he founded Project Management Essentials, sharing his knowledge and ability and skills with the businesses across the country. And he also works with George Mason University and Northern Virginia Community College as an adjunct professor. So welcome. Before I kick it over to Alan, I did want to kind of make some housekeeping notes. So this webinar will be recorded. We will post it on YouTube afterwards. In your handout section on your screen, you should see there's the slides attached, so feel free to download those if you prefer. I can also send them out to you if you needed. And then the other thing that we're going to do which is a little bit different than what we've done today, if you have questions, you can use the raise your hand feature and I can take you off mute. If your mic isn't working or you're having technical difficulties, you can also use the chat function and chat your question during the program, and we will answer that as we go. But without further ado, I'd like to kick it over to Alan for our program.
Thank you, Alex. It's wonderful to be here. So good morning, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about pivoting and how to adjust to uncertainty. And we're all in these uncertain times. COVID is very much a very difficult and challenging business environment. It's pretty funny. The other night, as I was listening to the news, there was an interview with Jason Wright, who's the incoming president of the Washington football team. And during the interview, he was talking about how the team, as well as the league, needed to learn how to pivot and to be more agile. And I chuckled to myself because the idea of pivoting and being agile, we usually associate that with startups and technology companies. But here's an industry or a league that it's as traditional as can be, and they've now started adopting these ideas of being agile and pivoting to adjust to the environment. So a little bit about myself, and thank you, Alex, for the introduction. I'm a proud Arlington resident as well as a small business owner in the county, and it's really great to be here today to give back to BizLaunch. When I started my company about 3 years ago, BizLaunch was really helpful. I went to a couple of their seminars and had some of the counseling sessions, and they really helped me get my business off the ground. And more recently, as I was trying to figure out how to adapt and adjust and navigate through COVID, Alex was really helpful in helping me find some of the resources that I needed. Have over 25 years of experience working in Fortune 100 companies. Started out working for MCI when MCI was down in Pentagon City, and I had 11 really great years down there. At MCI, I learned the value of chasing and seizing opportunities, and also the idea that if you don't experiment, if you don't try, you don't know what you're going to miss. And it had a corporate culture where failure was not punished and where bold ideas were encouraged. I then spent 11 years at Fannie Mae, and Fannie Mae was a different environment, and I was really fortunate enough to play a leadership role in Fannie Mae's lean agile transformation and helping that company become more competitive. About 3 years ago, I started my own company, Project Management Essentials, and I provide training. I work with a couple of national training providers. I work at adjunct at George Mason and Nova, and I also provide coaching and consulting services to a lot of small and medium-sized companies. Along the way, I picked up a raft of certifications and experience, and this helps me provide greater knowledge and experience when I'm working with my students as well as with my clients, the ones that I'm working with from a coaching and consulting perspective. So today we're going to learn how to fail fast to succeed sooner. And this phrase was captured or coined by David Kelly, who's the founder of IDEO Labs. IDEO Labs is a California company, a Northern California company that is, very well known in the design space, and they help companies implement and design and build new services, new products, and for everything from high tech to new banks and bank branches. The idea behind failing fast to succeed sooner is recognizing that there's no way we can plan everything out up front and get it just right. That the way we learn and the way we progress is through experimentation. And that we're going to experiment, we're going to take small failures, but by taking these small failures, we're not going to spend all this time and effort just to have something fail at the end. This is not really a new idea or concept. Thomas Edison had over 1,200 failures before he came up with the light bulb, and no one would call Thomas Edison a failure. When we talk about pivoting, we tend to think about technology companies and high-tech companies pivoting. We think about YouTube. Well, YouTube did not start out as a place where we go for all of our videos. YouTube started out as an online dating site, and then it moved based on what people were using. AVON, a very, a traditional company. Back in the late 1800s, David McConnell was a door-to-door salesman selling books. His primary customers were housewives. And what he learned is that the housewives were at least as interested in the free samples of the perfume as the books that he was trying to sell. And he took that knowledge and launched a home cosmetics company. That's one of the most, profitable companies today. Starbucks actually started out as a shop where people could buy coffee beans and espresso machines. 3 college friends, built the company. And in the 1980s, early 80s, they actually went off and came up with Peet's because they were more interested in roasting coffee. And they turned the company over to Howard Schultz, who was one of their store managers. And Schultz took Starbucks to be a place where there's, almost a Starbucks on every corner. I think in the Boston area, there's about 5 Starbucks within a couple of blocks. Play-Doh, which is one of our favorite, or was one of my favorite toys as a kid, started out actually as a wall cleaner. And it was very popular in coal regions, and people could use the Play-Doh or the dough to get the coal dust off the walls. And one of their customers, who was a kindergarten teacher, shared with them that her children, her students, enjoyed playing with it. And that's what made it one of the great consumer children's products that it is today. So let's look at the reality of the situation we're in. We are in what are referred to as complex times. COVID is a very complex problem. There's many unknowns. I mean, there's unknowns when it comes to the science. The scientists have done an amazing job learning about a virus in 8 months. There's still a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of unpredictable interactions. We cannot predict what's going to happen. Just probably a month and a half ago, we all thought that schools would probably be open in September and that we would be returning to our offices after Labor Day. It's just not going to be. And so thinking that we can make plans with all of this uncertainty just isn't going to work. So we need to think of different ways of approaching the problems that we have. And along with approaching our problems in a different way, it's also going to require us to have the courage to change. Change is not easy, and there are going to be upsets along the way. A couple of years ago, after I started my company, I was talking to one of my friends who had, at a similar point in his life, started his own company, and I was sharing my frustration that some work that I thought that I had lined up disappeared. And he's like, "Man, that's really hard." I said, "Yeah, but the way I tend to deal with those kinds of setbacks is I just picked up the phone and started calling other people. And within a couple of weeks, I actually filled the pipeline of work right back up." So having that courage and having that grit to move forward is an important consideration. So today we are going to cover a lot of ground and a lot of territory. We're going to talk about a little bit about emotional intelligence, which is our ability to understand ourselves. I'm going to share with you some of the tools on how to do brainstorming, structured brainstorming, which is a very powerful tool that you can use in multiple environments. And we'll talk about how we can use that here today. We'll use a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, as a tool to help us assess our situation and help us guide what we can do next. And then I'll introduce you into the exploration innovation model, which will help us identify and assess our opportunities, and develop an innovation board, which is a way of tracking these different ideas. And then I'll walk through how we can experiment and pivot and how we can use that as a tool as well. Any questions so far?
Alan, I'm not seeing anybody that
Okay.
has had their hand raised just yet. But again, just a reminder, because we have folks that joined after we started. But if you do have a question, feel free to use your raise a hand feature, and we'll take you off mute, and you can ask your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. So first, let's talk about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence really sort of is an idea that came about in the 90s, and it's really our ability to understand ourselves and understand others in order to make better decisions. Emotional intelligence is sort of on par with our intelligence, just as we have our IQ, our intelligence quotient. We can also score our emotional intelligence. Typically, people talk about 5 different dimensions of emotional intelligence, and today I'm going to really just focus on 2 of them. One is our outlook, which is really our ability on how we view events. Do we view them events optimistically, or are we sort of afraid of them? And secondly, we're going to talk about, or we're going to assess our adaptability, which is our ability to adjust to changes. So if you've downloaded the slide deck, you can fill this out as we go along. If not, just grab a scrap of paper and a pencil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read each of these 5 statements. And as I read the statements, I want you to score yourself. And then we'll score yourself for each statement and then add up the total score. So give yourself a 5 if this always applies to you, 4 if it mostly applies to you, 3 if it sometimes applies, 3 rarely, and 1 for never. So the first statement, I'm optimistic in the face of challenging circumstances. So score yourself there, and don't overthink this. This is really your quick response. Number 2, I see people as good and well-intentioned. 3, I focus on opportunities rather than obstacles. 4, I look forward to the future. And number 5, I feel hopeful. So add up your scores and write down the number. And now we'll go through the second series. And we'll score these again. And this should be independent of the first. Number 6, I'm flexible when situations change unexpectedly. 7, I'm adept at managing multiple conflicting demands. 8, I can easily adjust goals when the circumstances change. 9, I can shift my priorities quickly. And 10, I adapt easily when a situation is uncertain or changing. So add those up. And then here we can look at how you scored, or you can look at how you scored based on average scores. And if you wanted to, you can go out to the Harvard Business Review online and you can score yourself, against all of the dimensions of the emotional intelligence test. But by looking at these scores, and these are just gives you a sense of where have other people landed. And it helps us understand ourselves better. What's our outlook? Do we tend to think of our glasses being half full or half empty? And how easy is it for us to adapt to change? The good news is that our emotional intelligence scores are not set in stone. It's a little bit hard for us to move our IQ, which is supposed to be just our raw intelligence, but we can actually do things, proactively do things to improve our emotional intelligence. So when it comes to our outlook, some of the things we can do is actually just change the way we think about ourselves. We can believe that we can be successful. We can develop new habits, and one habit to develop is to have positive conversations rather than focusing on the negative and the things that aren't working. Think about the things that are working. Think about the things that are going well for us. If we want to improve our adaptability, one of the things we can do is consider options. And we're going to talk about how do we consider options and brainstorm and evaluate those options today. Also, look at ourselves. We can look internally. Why is it hard? Why is change hard for us? What are the things that hold us back? And there's practices that we can do with that in terms of, what are the things that are propelling us forward versus what are the things that are holding us back? And another thing is to consciously go outside your comfort zone. Force yourself to do things that are good for you, but are a little bit uncomfortable. Any questions so far? Okay.
Well, actually, Alan, I had a question
Yes, sir.
because it does relate. I love that you're talking about emotional intelligence, and having a positive outlook is very key. I'm curious though. Unfortunately, the environment that we're in, and I've noticed a lot of people kind of struggling with this, is that the environment is not necessarily positive. As a country, we're facing a pandemic, a health crisis. A lot of racial injustice issues have been really exposed and been going a long time. In thoughts around that, maybe it's not a perfect answer yet, but how does one kind of remain positive in an environment that is not most conducive for positive thinking?
I think part of it, all those things are true. There's a lot to be down about. I think it's looking for that silver lining, and I think that even amongst all of the things that are going on, there are some of those silver linings. I participated in one of the marches, after one of the marches in Arlington, and I was really encouraged by seeing how many people turned out, and the fact that I was marching, and there was 3 or 4 police, Arlington County police officers that were marching along with everybody, and it was a hot day, and that the police department was handing out water, and the fire department was handing out masks, and we were protesting for something very important, but to see Arlington County residents as well as the police and the fire walking together in terms of social justice, I was very touched. And I think it's like looking at what are the opportunities that we have out there, and being thankful for the things that are good amongst all the potential points of gloom. Is that helpful, Alex?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for sharing that. So, and I don't think we had any other questions either. So.
Okay, and really, I encourage everybody to ask questions. Having this being an interactive session, I think makes it a little bit better for everybody that's a participant. And that actually goes to the idea of one of the other items in terms of our emotional intelligence list, which is, let's go back, which is courage. So brainstorming is a very powerful tool. And when we brainstorm, the whole idea is to generate lots of ideas. What we know from brain science is that brainstorming itself, generating ideas, is a creative process. However, when we evaluate them, that's an analytic process. And our brains don't flip back and forth between being creative and analytic very well. And so quite often what we see, if you've done a brainstorming session in a business environment, quite typically what happens is people will, someone will come up with an idea, and then we'll spend the next, half hour or 45 minutes arguing the merits of that idea, and really nothing else is generated. So when we brainstorm, we want to generate a lot of ideas, and then we'll go about evaluating them. If you go out to my website, I wrote an article about how to do structured brainstorming, but we'll walk through it here as well. So the first thing is we want to brainstorm ideas. Easiest way of brainstorming ideas, get people together, hand out a bunch of Post-it notes, and have everybody write down all of the ideas that they can. One idea per note. And what you'll find is within about 10 to 15 minutes, people will have generated probably about a dozen or more ideas. And then we'll go through the process of categorizing them. Actually, literally, the way you do this if we're physically together is you brainstorm the ideas and then have people put them up on the wall in a random order, and then invite them to come up quietly, silently, in fact, and categorize them. And if you've got duplicate ideas, just decide, put them together, and we'll put them in categories, and we'll see the trends that begin to emerge. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get a bunch of little red stickers, the dots that we used as grade schoolers for our chore charts. We can go down the errors and get the dots, and everybody gets about 3 to 5 dots, and they get to vote what their preferences are. And this way, we can prioritize. We can see what people think will provide the greatest value or what's most important. I've used structured brainstorming as a way of, defining requirements, as a way to help nonprofit organizations come up with their mission statement, as a way for groups to help come up with what we refer the rules, the ground rules that they're going to work by. It's an invaluable tool that can be used in lots of different settings. And it takes less than an hour if it's a well-facilitated session. We're going to then use brainstorming, and we're going to conduct a SWOT analysis. And so what we'll do is we will brainstorm our situation. We'll bring people together, we'll hand out the cards, and we'll ask them to consider, what are the things that we do that provide us a competitive advantage? In other words, what do we do better than others? Also, and those will be our strengths. Then do our competitors do better than we do? What could we do? And then list out our concerns. And we know what we're going to do is we're going to let people just loose, write down all of the ideas that they have, and then we're going to go through the process of categorizing them and organizing them. In this case, we're going to put it onto a 2x grid, a SWOT analysis. We're going to look at our advantages versus our disadvantages, and our external versus our external. So our strengths are the things where we have a competitive advantage, and our opportunities are the things that we can do. Our weaknesses are where we're at a disadvantage, or the things we're not strong at. And the threats are the things that are beyond our control. Those are the negatives. So by going through the SWOT analysis, actually to sort of go back to your question a little bit earlier, Alex, we can use a SWOT analysis as a way of helping us find those silver linings. What are the things that we do well? What are the things that we do that others don't? And a way that we can do this is then look at how our strengths can help us overcome our weaknesses and our opportunities to overcome our threats. So let's say we are a small Neapolitan pizza restaurant in Arlington, and we're going through a SWOT analysis. So some of the strengths we have is we've got a good location, we've got some clever, creative owners who started off as a pizza truck and now have a brick and mortar store. We have unique product offerings. We have some of the best pizza around. Some of our opportunities, maybe we could franchise. Maybe we could open up new sales channels. Some of the weaknesses, we hadn't opened up with a delivery option because the pizza's best when it's right out of the oven. Also, we're a small company, so we might have limited capital. Some of the threats, our business model is being threatened by COVID. We can't have people eating inside. And there's now new regulations that, decrease the amount of pizzas customers we can serve, as well as, concerns we have in terms of ensuring food safety. So with that, what we can do is looking at our strengths and weaknesses, we can then start brainstorming, well, what are some of the things that we can do? And again, give the folks a bunch of Post-it notes and have them brainstorm different ideas. What are things that we can do? So we could offer outside dining. We could try doing either a pizza and wine pairing, or partner with a brewery. Maybe try some do-it-yourself workshops. Maybe try franchising. And then we can assess or evaluate those based on this effort versus value matrix. So we have things that are high value, low effort. Those are our quick wins. We should do those now. Things at low effort, low value, just do them, just get it done. Assuming that we've got the time, the capacity. The things that are high value, high effort, those are our strategic goals. Those are the things that we're going to need to think about, and we will plan to implement them as we can. And where we've got items that we've defined as having high effort, but low value, there's no payback. Don't even bother with those items. So then we can map up the items or the ideas we came up with and place them in the matrix. And this is just a quick way, we've defined all of these ideas, and this is just an easy, quick way to assess them and to evaluate the things we want to pursue. Any questions so far?
I love this value matrix. I don't think I'd actually seen this before. And it's funny because I always talk about, it's with working with businesses and even in our own team, we always talk about like that low hanging fruit. What is the low hanging fruit that we can have, like that quick win? And I thought this was very interesting. So thank you for bringing this. Did anybody have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand or send it through the chat if it's not, if your mic isn't working or something like that. Scale. But I guess, in this example, just the value matrix, when talking about it, do you kind of show, I mean, obviously there's something more strategic like franchising and raising capital, that's more long-term, and it requires some steps, in between, A and B to get there. So I guess my question is like, how do you kind of manage that component if you want to go? I mean, the quick wins is easy, and the easy, outside dining. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts on kind of going in that long-term direction in this matrix.
So actually, that's a good idea. And let me just, when we get to the innovation board, which is the next slide, we can actually talk about that.
Okay, sounds good.
Great lead-in question. So what we can do once we've generated the ideas is come up with an innovation board. And the idea behind an innovation board is to make sure that we've captured all the things that we want to do. And the innovation board can be simple. We could have a backlog, which is a prioritized list of all the things we want to accomplish, the things we're currently working on, and the things that we've completed. So we've, we've placed some items on our backlog. The items that we decided, were low value, low effort, we're going to just dispose of them. We're going to, easy. We're going to offer outside dining. We've got some space. We ordered up some tables and chairs. Boom, done. Then we're in the process of working with the delivery service. Pretty easy, a little bit to negotiate. And then we're looking at the items that are in our backlog. So for something like franchising, what we would do is we would take that big hairy nut and start breaking it down. And so for our strategic items, what we want to do is think about, well, you don't just go out tomorrow and franchise. There's going to be a lot of steps. So you're going to break down that whole franchising piece into the various steps and the various components, and you'll actually create an innovation board just for the franchising, where you've broken down all of the steps and all of the things that you need to do, and you start chipping away at them one by one. And what we want to do here is we want to take those big, sort of scary pieces and break them down into things where we can see accomplishments relatively quickly. It might be, what are the things that we can accomplish in the next week? And we keep chipping at it week by week by week, looking and building towards that long-term plan of franchising. And it may take us a year to get there, but that way we're actually starting on the journey and we're making progress. A little bit of progress every day, every week, every month.
Alan, do you recommend when companies are going through this, creating like a, excuse me, the camera's on, like a kind of a workflow, or, because like you said, I mean, franchising asset is a big opportunity. Like what kind of, I guess project management tools could people use that might be free or low cost to help them manage
Sure.
all of those components, especially if it's, they've got a lot of people, there's a lot of team, a lot of people involved in this, in the decision.
Sure. So if you're a single business and everybody's in the same location, the cheapest, easiest way of doing this is painter's tape and sticky notes on the wall. And there's a lot that we actually gain from having this as physically sitting on the wall. Interestingly enough, I was working with a fairly large nonprofit down in Crystal City, and I was working with the chief information officer there, the vice president of technology. And, she was new to the job, new to the company, and trying to, really get her hands around, well, what are the things that her division was working on? And we created a board just like this or similar to this on her wall. She had a glass wall, and initially she had it on the inside, so she could see everything that was going on and manage the flow of work for her division. And then after a while, she actually moved the whole innovation board, or the Kanban board, to the outside of her office, so everybody in the organization could see what IT was working on and what the priorities were in that backlog column. And that's very powerful. So if you're together, Post-it notes and painter's tape, best way to do it. If you are looking at electronic options, Trello has a free offering. If you use Microsoft Office Online, Microsoft Planner allows you to build simple Kanban boards. If you're looking for something a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit easier, particularly if you've got a widely distributed team using different platforms, there's a tool called LeanKit, which is about $25 a month. And if you just want to be able to create that same virtual environment, a tool that I like is Mural, which I think is about $12 to $15 a month. And there's another tool which is similar to Mural called Miro, which has a free version.
Okay.
So there's lots of different tools out there. Most of them are fairly low cost or reasonable cost as well.
But it sounds like simple is always better.
Simple is better. I mean, and actually physically seeing the cards on the wall makes you want to do something with them. And there's such a feeling of accomplishment when we move something from the doing to the done column.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So next we're going to talk about using an exploration and innovation model. And this is really taking some of the lessons that come to us from the lean startup, which is really just another iteration of the old Deming plan, do, check, act process. So we're going to start off with an idea. And this is where we're going to start off with, what are the things that we can do? We'll develop a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is, where we state, well, what do we think the benefit will be to us? And the more specifically we state the benefit and making it a measurable benefit, the better. We're going to define what we refer to as a minimum viable product. Remember, we are experimenting at this point. We're not going into full production. So our idea is, what can we offer that will allow us to see if people are interested in this product? And so how can I test it? How can I test it quickly? What we'll do is we'll deliver that minimum viable product. We'll run some experiments and we'll collect the metrics. At the end of a period, we will review what we've learned. We might learn that we need to adjust what we've offered. It may have been a good idea, in which case we will add more features to it, or we'll make it part of our regular offering. We might realize it was a bad idea, that we thought it was a great idea, that our customers would love it, but it turned out that we saw low interest, low volume, so we're going to just discard it. And that's the whole idea of failing fast. It might turn out that it was a good idea, but the way we chose to implement that idea really wasn't that well, or we've learned that people want one thing instead of another, in which case we're going to change what we did, we're going to re-experiment with it, and we're going to pivot it, we're going to go forward. And we're going to go through that process iteratively. And then when we are comfortable or we're happy with what we found, we'll sort of deliver that final product in a full production mode. So here's our innovation exploration model. We're going to start with an idea. We're going to take one of those cards off of our innovation board, top card. We're going to develop a hypothesis. What do we think will happen if we implement that idea? We'll go through our innovation process, our build, deploy, observe, and adjust. We're going to build something. We're going to put it out there, let our customers see it. How does it work? We'll observe them, measure them, and then we'll adjust. If it's a bad idea, we're going to discard it. And fortunately, at this point, we have not invested a lot of effort into the idea. So it's easy to discard without getting wrapped up in the sunk cost of the effort we've expended. We also may pivot. We may reimagine the idea. We may make changes to the idea. And we'll go through the process over and over until we come up with our final product. So here's what that might look like. We're going to start with our top idea on our innovation board, which is we're going to do a pizza and wine offering. So our hypothesis is that by doing this offering, we're going to increase our sales by X%. We're going to go through a trial. We're going to go through our first experiment. We'll say, we're going to try this pairing. We're going to do a special menu, and we'll try it for a week or 2 weeks. We'll collect the data. We'll see how it worked. And then we're going to adjust the offering based on that information. And so then we're going to go through a second trial. And what we learned is that there wasn't a real interest in a pizza and wine offering, but what we found is that people wanted to have a wine and cheese plate offering as a different type of menu option. So we're going to take that wine and cheese plate, and we're going to go back through the process again, of experimenting and refining what we've got. Any questions?
I guess one of the things sometimes I've seen is when sometimes businesses, when they spend a lot of time on kind of something that isn't working, or I've seen businesses do that. What kind of advice, I guess, what kind of advice, especially with certain ideas, sometimes people get really attached to an idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of advice would you give to folks in that regard, like how to kind of avoid that attachment, particularly if it's not working in their business or in that kind of nature?
So one of the reasons that the reason that I actually included the emotional intelligence assessment at the beginning was so that we could consider our adaptability. Because if we find that we get really wedded to an idea, we need to understand that, and we need to understand why are we holding on to something that may or may not be working for us. And that's sort of, a psychological process. And, one of the things that we talk about is the sunk cost fallacy, which is the idea that, I've already spent so much money and effort doing X, I need to consider, I need to continue doing X because eventually it will work. But what we need to think about differently is, rather than continuing to spend that time and effort working on X, I can now shift and put my money or put my time and effort into working on Y. And that's sort of the opportunity cost, because if I'm spending time on X, I can't do Y. And Y may actually be better for us. And that's sort of in our own heads, the psychology behind it. But from a physical instantiation of this, one of the things we want to do is try to go through these trials and make them very quick trials. When I'm teaching when I'm teaching some of my classes, there's a really cool video up on YouTube, which was an example from Nordstrom's Innovation Lab. And it's an example of how people at the Nordstrom's product development group showed up at a Nordstrom store in Seattle. And in the course of a week, they developed a new application to help customers, an iPad application, so customers could help them compare sunglasses by taking pictures of how the different glasses looked on them and comparing it. And they just sort of go through this process of trying, of trial and error and learning and getting that immediate feedback. And when we're able to let go and recognize that what we want to do is to be able to respond to what our customers want, or what we're seeing that our customers want, and to changing and getting that feedback, it really becomes a wonderful and powerful and energizing process.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
I don't think there's no one from the audience has questions so far, so I'll let you continue on.
So that's really, most of what I wanted to cover today, which is actually a lot for, 45-minute webinar. So some of the things, some final thoughts to share. One is, by understanding ourselves, it makes us recognize whether or not we are comfortable with change. What are the things that are driving us forward? What are the things that are holding us back? And quite often we can be our own worst enemies, or we can be our own best supporters. And so learning how to change and adapt and recognizing that we have power over that is very powerful. The other thing is, consider our options, and recognizing that the more ideas we generate, the better we are, or the better off we are. And we're going to want to use the structured brainstorming, and if you want to read the article, it's available on my website, to generate lots of ideas. And then once we generate the ideas, we can assess them and we can prioritize them based on lots of different models. We can use the dot voting, or you can use the value effort matrix is another way of doing it. Using an innovation board to track our progress allows us to see, to break down those big things, those big complicated projects, those strategic efforts into smaller pieces, and help us get that work done more quickly. And if you have that as a physical board, it's really valuable, because then you're staring at that thing. It's like, I haven't made any progress on that card yet. And that's a tool that we can adopt in lots of different contexts. Then we talked about the idea of exploration and innovation. And here, it's that instantiation of the fail fast to succeed sooner. Let's experiment. Let's get data. And we're going to have some small setbacks, but those small setbacks are actually not bad. They're opportunities for us to learn. And through that learning, it will help us succeed, and not just succeed sooner, but will actually help us develop a better project or better product. And that by pivoting and adjusting, particularly in a time of such uncertainty, is how we will succeed. The things that we thought were, just go back to March. Go back to March 1. Our world's changed on March 13th. And the things we thought about in mid-March or April are now different than the reality that we're facing today. So our ability to be able to respond to those changes and respond quickly is what will help us become successful as we move forward. So if people have questions, I'm happy to entertain questions now. And also, I do this. I speak here. I do my training. I do my instruction because it's really something that I love. I'm passionate about project management, passionate about leadership. So if you have any questions, you can send me an email. You can go out to my website. I've authored over 70 different articles on project management, agility, and leadership. They're all there. And, I welcome for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. There's my contact information. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to talk.
Yeah, thank you. And folks, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll take you off mute, and you can ask your questions, in live. I really love this presentation. Thank you for sharing this content with us, Alan. I think, in very complex environment, what, like you said, March, things were a lot different, today as compared to March, and so people have had to adjust accordingly. I thought it was interesting about, well, a couple things. One that you mentioned with Starbucks and Pete's. So I didn't realize that, but actually, Starbucks, or I guess Pete's Coffee came first. It came out of Starbucks. Did I understand that correctly?
It's sort of interesting that there was a brewing technique by, I think it was Pete Alfred, who was, I want to say, Norwegian. And so these three guys who went to I think they might have been UC Berkeley or UC Oakland, loved this brewing technique and came up with decided like, we're going to open up this coffee shop. And then, I think they opened the shop in 70, 71, and they were successful. And in the mid 80s, I want to say like 83, 84, they actually then took Pete's and began the franchise Pete's. And Howard Schultz, who was the manager at the Starbucks, they turned over Starbucks to him, and Schultz took Starbucks off into this meteoric direction.
Interesting. Yeah. Sometimes you always wonder if like there was some guilt there, like looking back, but I never know. You never know.
Maybe they had a stake, so it was okay.
Very good. I don't think we have any questions at this point. So I guess we'll just kind of go ahead and conclude it. One thing I did want to say to folks, make this announcement, is Alan came to me, wanting to give back, and I'm so thankful for him taking the time to share his knowledge and experience with the community. But we've developed a program called BizTalk. And what it is we're looking for, folks, we've got a very educated, very robust small business community. We'd love to hear, if you're interested in presenting on topics like this, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Alex Held, and reach out to Arlington Economic Development. We'd love to feature you like this, because there's a lot of experience and knowledge within our small business community where we can all help each other as we kind of navigate these unprecedented challenges that we're facing. So feel free to reach out. The other thing is, if you're, a business that's looking to pivot, we have resources here at Arlington Economic Developments, that we're happy to meet with folks, to talk through your SWOT analysis, or if you want to, talk about that, we're happy to meet one-on-one. And someone asked me, yes, I will happily enter my email in the chat, so you can reach out to me. So there's that for you. But and yes, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel as well. So we'll have that, and I will also send out a note.
And if I can just give a small plug for Biz Launch and particularly the SCORE program, which I took great advantage of. It was amazing. There are just some really great resources, free resources available to the business owners here in Arlington, and it's very helpful to get that experience. Even if you're an experienced business person, pivoting to becoming a small business owner, I learned a lot from that.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, and thank you for mentioning SCORE as well, because they've, a lot of, they used to meet with clients in our office when we were in our office, but now they've pivoted and gone virtual and offering a lot of really robust programming there. And SCORE is a national program. It stands for the Supplier or Service Corps of Retired Executives, I believe is the acronym. And so these are really, business owners who've succeeded, and this is their way of getting back. And it's a tremendous resource, Alan, that you mentioned. And, someone asked, it's like, no, you don't have to be an Arlington-based business to access these resources. Obviously, webinars like this are open to anybody with a computer, but also we do meet with clients as well that are not Arlington business or based as well. So our services are available to anybody, as well as SCORE nationally as well. So those are available to you. But with that said, I'd like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon or this morning. And we look forward to seeing you at future programs. Stay up to date with us. bizlaunch.org is always your best resource in seeing what's going on. On our YouTube channel, we have a plethora of different programs available to you. I'd like to do a little quick plug for our next speaker. It's going to be a company called Yokoco, and they're going to be talking about digital marketing and making sure your website is working for you. A lot of companies have gone virtual. So how do we, and yes, it's nice to have a website that's a key component, but is it driving the results that you're wanting? So we're going to talk about that in our next one on September 18th. So again, thank you for your time, Alan. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful weekend as well. So thank you. Oh, thank you. Take care, everybody.